morning, everybody. Welcome to the Ascent Leadership Show with Jason Garcia, based out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. But this is not just a local show. This is a show that's going to be featuring guests all over the country. But this is the kickoff show. And I am so excited to have our first guest, Chuck Garcia. Chuck, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jason. I am so excited to be here and grateful for the opportunity to help you lead it off.
Awesome. So, Chuck, tell the audience where you're calling in from today.
I am a New Yorker. I am in New York. I am all about New York. But however, to your point, it doesn't matter where I'm from because you have the opportunity to take people from anywhere. There's no longer any distance in our life. Look at the way we're able to connect to each other.
Absolutely. And for those sports fans, I mean, was it a big year with the Knicks? And are you a Mets or Yankees fan?
To say that it was a big year for the Knicks is an understatement. Given there were no expectations in New York about what the Knicks could do, they converted people who formerly didn't care one iota about basketball. They suddenly became Knicks fans.
Absolutely.
It was amazing. It was great for New York. As for the Mets and the Yankees, this is a very sad tale because it's a tale of two cities. I was a Met fan as a kid. It's very difficult, and you have to remind ourselves that if you really are a true fan, you're still a fan of the Mets, of which I am. But God knows they need some help, and I'm rooting for them.
Awesome. I love it. Well, let's just jump right in. This is our kickoff show. We can make it whatever we want it to be. My focus with the show is really to dive in with different leaders and leadership styles and experiences for our audience. And our audience might be everything from student athletes all the way to business professionals. So would you mind sharing with the audience a little bit about your professional experience over the years?
You bet. Well, for context, I am a Wall Streeter. My New York roots helped me recognize from the time I was a little kid, being in the proximity of New York, it's all I ever wanted to do. I'm very proud of the fact that the Wall Street companies that I represented are household names, at least in the world of business. So, Jason, I spent 14 years at a little company no one ever heard of, for a guy that no one ever heard of called Mike Bloomberg. And it was an incredible ascent that I had in my 14 years there. From there, I went to a company that no one ever heard of when I joined it called BlackRock, and now it is the largest asset manager in the world. And then I went to an alternative investment manager where I finished the first part of my career called Citadel Investment Management. To bring our audience up to date, 10 years ago, I decided I didn't need to do that anymore. So now I do three things. Number one, I am a public speaker. I spend about a third of my time traveling the world, doing keynotes and other speaking engagements. Second thing, I'm a Columbia University professor. I am faculty appointed in the Graduate School of Engineering. I am not an engineer. I am a Wall Streeter, but I teach in a program called Professional Development and Leadership, where I teach human skills to brilliant engineers. And then a third of my time, I'm what's called an executive coach. I coach people the way a personal trainer would, so to speak. At the corporate level, I work for many, mostly financial institutions because that's my pedigree. And I'll wrap this statement up with two things that I help people to do because it's what I do. As a leadership coach, I don't claim to do all things for all people, but I have two domains. One of them is public speaking. I do a lot of it myself, and I teach people to do it well. That's the outer self. So when I'm working on someone to how they show up, that's in the realm of public speaking. But Jason, the most important thing that I do, and I want to wrap it up with this one, is the inner self. I teach emotional intelligence. And when I'm helping someone to create their outer layer, what's most important to me is what's inside that individual. It's my responsibility as the coach to figure out their fears, what is uncertain that may be causing them conflict, what are their dreams, their hopes, and their aspirations, and my capacity to help them unlock their potential. And if I had to say that's one thing that I do in my life, that is the most important thing, is helping people to recognize their potential and how high they can climb in their lives and in their careers.
I love it. I love it. I mean, quite the background, the professional experience and or experiences you've had. It's all kind of lined up to where you're at now. But you hit on something important, which is emotional intelligence, or sometimes people refer to it as EQ. Can you just, for the audience, give them a brief overview on some of the components that make up emotional intelligence?
You bet. Well, first, when I think about that word intelligence, what we typically ascribe it to are two letters called IQ. And we think about intelligence as a matter of intellect. However, in the early 1990s, a social scientist from Harvard named Daniel Goleman wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence. And the subtitle to the book is Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. So the first thing that he did is provoke a change in what intelligence could be. So looking at the emotional side, we're moving it from the intellect. So let's gravitate from the mind to the heart. The one thing we all have in common as human beings is we feel. We feel happy, we feel sad. Sometimes we don't know how we feel, but we do indeed feel, and that's what makes us human. What the social scientists did with the construction of this concept that we now refer to as EQ are four sides of your emotional intelligence: self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, and relationship management. Those, Jason, are the four corners, the pillars of emotional intelligence. What we do as emotional practitioners and as teachers is to measure each of those domains, monitor them based upon our behaviors, and learn from the precepts that emotional intelligence helps us to become more emotionally intelligent. And by that, we become more self-aware. We become more socially aware. My capacity to read a room on body language is a perfect example of social awareness. So to put that into its proper context, everyone has it. They may not be aware of it, but we have the capacity to manage our emotions. And in the context of Ascent Academy, or my company, Climb Leadership, it's about continuing the ascent, yet having the toolkit to stay calm under the weight of pressure and expectations. That's what emotional intelligence does for people who are most focused on working through the pressure to achieve their potential.
I love it. I love it. We're going to take a quick break here, Chuck, and I want to circle back on emotional intelligence and how it's shown up in your personal life.
I'm Ben Lucero, president and owner of Indigo Mortgage. We are a locally owned and operated mortgage company right here in New Mexico. This means your loan officers and processors are right here to serve you. Indigo Mortgage offers better rates and terms than that of big banks and out-of-state lenders. Our mortgage divisions include residential, commercial, construction, reverse mortgages, and VA mortgage loans. Let us serve you with an exemplary level of care. Indigo Mortgage, because nobody cares more about your mortgage loan.
Rudy's is a proud supporter of ProView Networks.
Okay, we are back with Chuck Garcia and the Ascent Leadership Show, brought to you by myself, Jason Garcia. And if some of you are wondering, no, Chuck and I are not related, but we are brothers from other mothers. And he's here doing the show with us today, our kickoff show, based out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Chuck's coming in from New York. So, Chuck, thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Jason. It's great to be here.
So before we went to the break, you were talking a little bit about self-awareness, and I can even speak for my career, 23 years in corporate America, one with the largest used car financing dealership in the nation, I worked for Tony Robbins and Mastermind and so forth. I would say as my career path continued on and slowly started to ascend, self-awareness is something that I had to constantly be aware about, because really it's a blind spot, if we're being honest about it, for most people. Can you talk a little bit about self-awareness, why it's important, and maybe how to identify it, being that it could be a blind spot in most cases?
Well, it definitely is. Let me, if I may, Jason, just give you an origin of how I found it, not knowing what it was or why it even mattered.
Perfect.
I was about 8 years into my career. This is my 5th year at Bloomberg, and I was ascending into pretty important and visible leadership positions. When you are leading other people, it can be an incredibly emotional high and low, depending on the day and depending on the people and your gravity. On a fateful day, where I was expecting an employee. He was a substandard employee, but he was on a project with me. I didn't choose him in the company, but he delivered to me something that I needed, that I was on a deadline that was absolutely god-awful and embarrassing, that I had to hand to my CEO. In a moment of sheer terror, Jason, I erupted in front of him and 100 other people with an anger and a backlash that I am so embarrassed to admit. I yelled and screamed at him. I got into his face. I pointed at him. And yet, when the episode was all over, all I could think about is I'd taken years to build my credibility, and I'm about to lose it in a split second.
Wow.
But there was nothing I could have done when that episode ended that could have rewound and changed what I did. But I recognize if there's one thing that has to change, that's me. I needed to change myself, but I also needed to understand what happened in that episode that would prompt me to even think about it. And what I discovered, Jason, is in my moment of anger toward this individual, I didn't understand why I got angry. I didn't know how to manage my anger. I didn't know how to stay calm under the weight of that derision and tension that I had created. So I left the office that day and I walked to a Barnes & Noble, and I blindly walked through the hallways of that bookstore looking for something that, if there's a God in heaven, he or she is going to hit me over the head with something that could help me understand. And sure enough, there was this book called Emotional Intelligence. As I was looking at the bookshelf, I said, well, that doesn't apply to me. I'm certainly emotional and I'm not intelligent. I was a complete idiot and moron that day, but maybe there's something in there. I opened up the book, Jason, and I spent the rest of the afternoon reading this book. And it was as if the cavemen discovered fire, or Einstein discovered the laws of relativity. I was seeing myself in the description of the book, and I didn't understand it until then, just what was going on. And what I was not was aware of my own emotions. And to your question, does it reveal itself or why it's important? Because it would have almost crushed my reputation. I was fortunate that I had 5 years of credibility and a good history, but I watched it about to shatter until I went back to everybody and I asked him, the employee, for forgiveness, and all the people that listened to me. I was vulnerable enough to say, I really screwed up and I'm so sorry, it won't happen again. And it never happened again, Jason, because I became a student and practitioner of how to manage my emotions, how to stay calm under the weight of pressure and expectations, and how to behave as a decent human being, even under the weight of all that adversity.
Amazing. Amazing humility to share that story, to do something with it. And I think a lot of times, people don't really understand when you're working for a corporation with that name, a blue chip corporation, the stakes are extremely high. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in some of these deals and transactions, and there's no room for error. And so outside looking in, I can totally empathize and appreciate where your frustration came from. And then sometimes people have maybe things going on outside of work, and everything just kind of comes to a head, but you were able to kind of take that instance and make it into your message. Now,
and if I may, I want to add something to it. What is the cost to all of us, to you, to me, of our reputational risk?
Right.
We can measure sales, we can measure a lot of things, but we can't measure that. You're either credible, trustworthy, and respectful, or you're not. There's no continuum when it
Right.
comes to that. And here I spent so many years building that, only to me, self-inflicted harm shattered it because I didn't understand it.
Right.
This was a gift, Jason. It was the most embarrassing and lowest point in my career, but in retrospect, it was the best thing in my career. And how could that be?
Right.
Because for all of us, we're all under the weight of pressure. We all know what that feels like. And then you go home, you have family issues, and everything is weighing on us, and it's got to come out. What I learned, though, and I also added an ancient philosophy of Stoicism, I thought about how do I best practice this? If I could reinvent education, Jason, I would have every student in America, everyone that's listening to me, everyone in the world, go back to school and learn social science, learn the philosophy of Stoicism, but we don't focus on behaviors. We focus on exams and cram, exam, and regurgitate. I was tested that day, but it wasn't a grade. I failed it if I would have gotten a grade. We are always tested in how we show up, how we communicate, and how we behave. This is huge. And to all of us who have done what you and I done, or any listener, recognize you're not let off the hook because you're the most brilliant guy in the room, because you have an Ivy League pedigree, because you are the son of a billionaire or a politician. We're all just human beings at the table trying to get through a day. And yet if we learn about ourselves, our self-awareness, and we learn how to shine on the outside, that's our external being. Jason, to you, to me, we're about our internal being. We are the combination of that external and the internal. And we're works in progress, and we need to work it. Because if we just left it alone, the biology is going to let all of that anger go everywhere without the capacity to control it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have about 1 more minute that we're going to cut to a break, but I wanted to ask you, most people talk about intelligence or general intelligence. How would you kind of weight the two, emotional intelligence versus intelligence, specifically to being an effective leader?
Yeah. When I think about what we ascribe to effective leaders, 3 things come to mind. Number one, they operate under what we call grace under fire. They are calm under the weight of that pressure. That has nothing to do with their intellectual side and the capacity to stay calm. Number 2, they manage conflicts effectively. They're not a jerk in the conflict. And number 3, they are empathetic. They may not agree with you, but they feel their pain. This is a succession plan I did for very large financial institutions where these 3 characteristics, Jason, came out as to what people in a survey felt were the most effective leaders. Where does your GPA or alma mater show up in that frame? Nowhere. What we're talking about are human behaviors, and those human behaviors are what people look to become an extraordinary leader.
Awesome. Well, you have the background with the mountains in the back. When we get back from this break, I want to talk about being a mountaineer, what that means, and what it's meant to you.
Well, I'm going to the frontier, walk up to the cashier, order up a root beer and a number 1. Cover it with green stuff, 1 scoop is not enough. Find a booth is real tough, back by the Duke. Meet my family, meet my friends in the quirkiest restaurant I have ever been. All of Albuquerque's favorite spot, it's the Frontier Restaurant.
The Frontier Restaurant is a proud supporter of ProView Networks.
Hi there, this is Jason Garcia. This is the Ascent Leadership Show. This is our kickoff show with no other than Chuck Garcia. Chuck Garcia is the founder and president, CEO of Climb Leadership. He's an author, he's a mountaineer, adjunct professor at Columbia University, and a former Wall Streeter. We're so happy to have him on the show. Chuck, I wanted to touch back on, as we were talking about leadership and EQ and IQ, who would you say is the most influential leader that you've either partnered with, worked for, just kind of who's that person that's been kind of that guiding light for you?
Oh, without question, it's Mike Bloomberg. He gave me a gift early on in my career that I strive every day to repay. Jason, I learned more being in his gravity in 2 weeks than I did in 4 years of studying business at the undergraduate level at Syracuse University. No offense to my alma mater, but you can only do so much in a book, and the book does not help you to become a practitioner of what you're trying to learn. I joined his company as a 190th employee when no one ever heard of him. And I watched him operate, and I watched the way he inspired. I watched the way he gave us permission to make mistakes and to fail, and to stand up and fall and stand up and fail. What we could not fail, what was not negotiable, was our character. Anything we would do that would tarnish the reputation of ourselves and our CEO was never permitted. What was permitted was the experimentation, the try-in, doing all kinds of things. And I cannot state enough with enormous enthusiasm that he saw something in me that I wasn't sure I saw in myself. And for 7 years, Jason, I was the company's public spokesman. He had announced to the world that he was going to run for either mayor of New York or president of the United States. He ran for both. He won one, he didn't win the other, but my position was to speak publicly all over the world about the brand Bloomberg. I cannot communicate enough what a gift he gave me, and it's because of him, Jason, that I go to work every day in the service of someone else's success, striving to repay the gift that he gave me.
Amazing. That's amazing how fortunate you were to be in that position. And then obviously you have to take advantage of those positions and make the most of it. So, congrats on all the success you've had with Bloomberg and beyond. So I got to get to your background. You have a mountain in the background, a peak, and it looks like somebody's climbing that, and it might even be you. You're a mountaineer. For the layman, what is a mountaineer, and how did you become one?
Yeah, well, for the layman, we all know what a mountain is. You recognize that, but that doesn't mean that you've ascended on one. And when I first started climbing mountains, Jason, I said to myself, oh, I've climbed a mountain. It's when I climbed Kilimanjaro and the Matterhorn that I knew I became a mountaineer. So for context, I didn't set out to do this. It wasn't anything that was in my life plan. I grew up in a place called West Point, New York, which is an hour north of New York, and a very wintry place. From the time I was a little kid, I knew how to skate and ski and always gravitated to winter sports. On 9/11/01, I was scheduled to speak on the 107th floor of the World Trade Center in the North Tower. My original time to speak was 9:20 a.m. For anyone who remembers their history, you know that the planes struck the World Trade Center a few minutes before. And Jason, everyone thought, my family and my company thought I was in the building. Fortunately, through a simple twist of fate, I was not. But by the time I got back to the Bloomberg office, I was outside of the office at another meeting when the plane struck. The subway shut down and the cell phones were not working. I could not call my wife to tell her I'm alive. My wife thought I was dead. People at Bloomberg thought I was dead. And when I got back to the office, there was a list, unaccounted for and presumed dead. There were 4 people on the list. The other 3 died. They were there in the service of my speech.
Wow.
I say that with a big breath because it was a simple twist of fate that I am alive. I was supposed to be there, but I wasn't. And I asked myself a question, Jason, that I couldn't answer. Why was it not my day to die? This was an existential question, and the moron me didn't know even how to have a method by which I could answer that question. Why did I not die when 2,997 people did? I attended 16 funerals and memorial services after that event, and
Wow.
it was an incredibly sad time in our lives, but it wasn't me. So I had to get over the fact that, hey, I'm here, I'm not going to feel guilty for it, but what do I do with it? And at the time that that happened, I had just read a book called Into Thin Air by a guy named John Krakauer, which described a mountain climbing incident on Mount Everest. Before that, I read a book by Viktor Frankl, an Auschwitz survivor, called Man's Search for Meaning. So think about the juxtaposition of a book I was reading from an Auschwitz survivor that looked for meaning, and a book that I read about 8 people who died, but I saw myself as a mountaineer, and it happened on Mount Everest. So Jason, since I didn't have an answer to the question and I couldn't figure out how I'm going to answer it, I needed to get away from life for a while. And I didn't know whether I was going to find myself or lose myself, but I thought that mountaineering, I needed to get out of New York. I needed to get out of the office. I needed to get away from everyone. I don't know why, but something led me and inspired me to go on a mountain climbing trip to Mount Rainier in the Caucasus, in the Cascade Mountains in Washington. And after I summited that mountain, I came down and I said, I don't know what it did for me, but it did fuel my curiosity to climb another mountain. I then climbed Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa a year later. I then climbed the Matterhorn in Switzerland. But here's what was important, Jason. I was beginning to get clarity on why I was alive. I watched these mere mortals like me, mountain guides, lead me up a mountain. They were technically competent. They were inspiring. They were great teachers. Here I was watching the combination of what I thought was a great teacher, but not in a classroom on a mountain. And I said to myself, I don't know what's going to happen when I leave Wall Street, but I was so in awe and admired immensely that they climbed the mountain in the service of my success. Jason, it became life-changing. I decided, I came down a mountain from Mount Elbrus that I describe in my book called The Moment That Defines Your Life. I had a life-defining moment, my second moment when I thought I was going to die, and I didn't. I completely changed direction. And when I got home from the mountain, I said, from here on in, Jason, I said just like that, I am no longer going to climb the mountain of self. I've done that.
Right.
I'm going to climb the mountain of service. It's called The Second Mountain, written by David Brooks, a New York Times journalist. And the second mountain, Jason, is what I committed to do. And for the last 11 years, every single day, I guide people up their proverbial mountains. Whether they climb a physical mountain, everybody is on a mountain climb, and they're all hard. But by the time you reach that goal, you recognize the fulfillment that comes with helping people to achieve those goals. Mountaineering, to me, Jason, is just a mechanism to help people ascend. I don't care. You could be a race car driver, a track runner. It's just one aspect of going to work in the service of someone else's success. I'm just very blessed that I found this as a metaphor that I can use and as part of my teaching narrative.
I love it. I love it. Well, Chuck, I could talk to you all day. I love the history. I love the experience, your expertise on EQ. We are unfortunately out of time, but a few things. One, audience out there, go to chuckgarcia.com. If you go to chuckgarcia.com, you're going to find Climb Leadership. You're going to find his 3 TED Talks. You're going to find both his books. Everything is there. You can also reach out to Chuck Garcia at chuckgarcia.com. He does speaking engagements. There's just a lot of good content there that you can apply to your personal and professional life. Chuck, before we go, just a quick question for you. What's one question you'd like to leave for the next guest?
The question is mission focused, and I want the next guest to ask themselves, what have you done today to make a difference in someone else's life?
Perfect. Perfect. Chuck, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. That wraps up our first show, the Ascent Leadership Show. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.